Chapter 1 Broken. The wind howled like a dying animal, tearing through the torrential rain. At the very edge of the precipice, overlooking a black, churning abyss, stood a wheelchair. Baek Do-jin sat in it, his knuckles stark white as he gripped the armrests. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his chest heaved with ragged breaths. Above him stood a woman. Her face was shadowed by the storm, but the sheer, unpredictable rage radiating from her was unmistakable. "You think you can cheat on me and get scot-free?" Her voice pierced through the thunder, sharp and venomous. She stepped closer, her hands reaching out, grabbing the handles of his chair. The metal wheels groaned against the wet, loose gravel. She was pushing him toward the drop. Do-jin's eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and a sudden, desperate fury, snapped up to meet hers. He had been helpless for too long. He had absorbed her cruelty for too long. As the front wheels of the chair slipped over the void, Do-jin lunged. With a guttural shout, his hands shot out, gripping her wrists with the unyielding strength of a man fighting for his life. He twisted his weight backward, anchoring the heavy chair against the stone. The violent shift in momentum caught her completely off guard. The woman's feet slipped on the muddy ledge. Her eyes widened, the rage evaporating into pure, unadulterated shock. Do-jin shoved her arms away to save himself. She lost her footing completely. Her hands clawed at the empty, freezing air. With a scream that was swallowed instantly by the roaring waterfall, she plummeted backward into the darkness. Do-jin sat at the edge of the cliff, his breath catching in his throat as the heavy splash echoed far below, leaving behind nothing but the relentless, punishing rain. 2 years later, the sunlight in the bridal suite was soft, filtering through sheer silk curtains to cast a golden, angelic glow across the room. The deafening roar of the waterfall was gone, replaced by the delicate clinking of champagne flutes and the faint, elegant hum of a string quartet warming up in the gardens below. Louise Mona stood before a towering, gold-gilded mirror. She was a vision. Her dark skin practically glowed against the intricate, pearl-encrusted lace of her custom couture gown. The bodice hugged her waist perfectly before cascading into a voluminous train that looked like spun sugar. She looked soft. She looked radiant. She looked utterly harmless. A gentle hand smoothed the delicate tulle of her veil. Nia, her best friend and fiercest protector, stood behind her, a warm smile playing on her lips. Nia wore a stunning emerald bridesmaid dress, but her eyes were entirely focused on Mona's reflection. "Look at you," Nia whispered, resting her chin lightly on Mona's shoulder. "You look like actual royalty, Mona. The society pages are going to lose their minds tomorrow." Mona let out a breathy, nervous laugh, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched the diamond necklace resting against her collarbone. "I feel like I'm dreaming, Nia. What if I wake up?" "If this is a dream, you are never waking up," Nia said firmly, turning Mona around to face her. Nia's eyes softened, taking in the innocent, wide-eyed wonder of her best friend. Ever since Madame Helena Jean had introduced Mona to society, Nia had loved her like a sister. Mona was so fragile, so pure-hearted, that Nia constantly felt the need to shield her from the vicious wolves of high society. Nia tilted her head, a playful smirk breaking through her sentimental expression. "So, you love him, don't you?" A deep, profound blush rushed to Mona's cheeks. She lowered her gaze, suddenly fascinated by the bouquet of white peonies resting on the vanity. She nodded shyly, her heart fluttering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I do," Mona murmured, her voice laced with an overwhelming, vulnerable sincerity. "When I met him on that blind date, it was like my soul recognized him. I know he seems guarded to other people, Nia. I know he can be intimidating, but the way he looks at me, it makes me feel like I finally have a home. I feel safe." Nia smiled, squeezing Mona's hands. "That's all I want for you. He's a lucky man, Mona. If Baek Do-jin ever does anything to dim that light in your eyes, billionaire or not, he'll have to answer to me." Mona giggled, the sound light and musical. "He's wonderful, Nia. Truly. Today is going to be perfect." And for the next 4 hours it was. The wedding of Baek Do-jin and Luis Mona was the undisputed event of the decade. The cathedral was transformed into an indoor forest of white roses, weeping willows, and cascading crystals. As the heavy wooden doors swung open and Mona began her walk down the aisle, a collective, breathless gasp rippled through the hundreds of elite guests. Mona couldn't see the crowd. She couldn't see the flashing cameras, the envious glares of socialites, or the proud, weeping face of her adoptive mother in the front row. Her eyes were locked entirely on the man waiting for her at the altar. Do-jin stood tall, broad-shouldered, and immaculately tailored in a bespoke black tuxedo. He was devastatingly handsome, his sharp, aristocratic features perfectly still. But as Mona approached, his dark eyes locked onto hers, and a slow, breathtaking smile spread across his face. It was a smile that melted the icy exterior he was famous for. When Madame Jean placed Mona's small, trembling hand into Do-jin's, his fingers wrapped around hers with a warm, reassuring strength. He leaned down, his lips brushing against the shell of her ear. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he whispered, his voice a deep, intoxicating rumble that sent shivers down Mona's spine. Throughout the ceremony, Do-jin played the role of the utterly captivated groom with terrifying perfection. He held her hand tenderly, his thumbs stroking her knuckles. When it was time for their vows, he looked deeply into her eyes, making promises of eternal protection that brought tears to the eyes of half the congregation. And when the priest finally announced them as husband and wife, Do-jin didn't just give her a polite, ceremonial kiss. He pulled her flush against his chest, his hand tangling in the hair at the nape of her neck, and kissed her with a consuming, passionate intensity that left Mona dizzy and breathless. The reception was a blur of laughter, dancing, and whispered envy. "He's obsessed with her," a prominent CEO's wife muttered to her table, glaring at the newlyweds as they glided across the marble dance floor. Do-jin hasn't looked at a woman in years, and he looks at this girl like he wants to worship her. Mona rested her head against Do-jin's chest as they swayed to the music, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. She closed her eyes, silently thanking the universe for giving her such a loving husband. By the time they boarded Do-jin's private jet later that evening, Mona was exhausted but radiantly happy. She changed into a chic, comfortable travel dress, curling up in the plush leather seat across from her husband. Do-jin watched her quietly over the rim of his scotch glass, his expression unreadable in the dim cabin lighting. Mona just smiled at him, assuming he was tired from the festivities. They landed at a private, hyper-exclusive resort island just as the sun was beginning to set, casting the tropical sky in bruised shades of purple and fiery orange. The humid, salt-tinged air wrapped around them as they stepped off the tarmac and walked into the grand, open-air reception pavilion. Mona was admiring the breathtaking architecture, her heart swelling with anticipation for their romantic honeymoon. When the first crack in the perfect facade appeared, Do-jin, a voice, sultry and dripping with familiarity, echoed across the marble lobby. Mona blinked, turning toward the sound. A woman was walking, no strutting, toward them. She was stunning, dressed in a crimson silk slip dress that left absolutely nothing to the imagination, her dark hair cascading down her back in loose waves. She had the predatory grace of a runway model, and her eyes were fixed entirely on Do-jin. Before Mona could even process what was happening, the woman threw her arms around Do-jin's neck. She pressed her body flush against his and kissed him, not on the mouth, but lingering right on the corner of his lips, leaving a stark smudge of red lipstick behind. "You made it," the woman purred, her hands resting intimately on his chest. "I was getting bored waiting." Mona froze, her breath hitched in her throat, a sudden, icy knot forming in her stomach. She looked at Do-jin, waiting for him to step back, waiting for him to politely push the woman away and introduce his new wife, waiting for the cold, protective billionaire who had whispered sweet nothings to her all day to put this stranger in her place. Do-jin didn't step back. He didn't wipe the lipstick away. Instead, a slow, relaxed smirk appeared on his face, a look Mona had never seen before. It wasn't the warm smile from the altar. It was sharp, arrogant, and deeply cruel. "Traffic over the Pacific," Do-jin replied smoothly, his voice dropping into a low, intimate register. He didn't even glance in Mona's direction. Mona stood there, completely invisible. The heavy, suffocating silence stretched on. She gripped the strap of her purse, her knuckles turning white. "Do-jin?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Who is this?" Do-jin slowly turned his head to look at her. The warmth in his dark eyes was gone. The tender, adoring husband she had married just hours ago had vanished, replaced by a stranger with eyes like dead winter. He didn't answer her question. He looked down at the 3 heavy designer suitcases resting on the marble floor beside her. "The penthouse is at the top of the south cliff," Do-jin said, his voice flat and completely devoid of emotion. "Bring the luggage up. Don't scratch the floors." Mona's heart stopped. She stared at him, her mind completely blank, unable to comprehend the words coming out of his mouth. What? Do-jin, the bellboy. I said." Do-jin interrupted, his tone dropping into a deadly, quiet command that made her flinch. "Bring the luggage up." He turned his back on her. He placed a hand on the small of the crimson-dressed woman's back, guiding her toward the private VIP elevators. The woman glanced over her shoulder at Mona, a cruel, mocking smile playing on her lips, before the elevator doors slid shut, swallowing them both. Mona stood utterly alone in the massive lobby. The golden glow of her perfect day had violently shattered into a million jagged pieces. Her chest tightened, panic and confusion threatening to choke her. Why? What did I do wrong? Did I offend him on the plane? Is this a test? Her hands shook as she grabbed the heavy handles of the suitcases. She dragged them across the lobby, the wheels catching on the marble, each metallic clatter sounding like a gunshot in the quiet pavilion. She was a billionaire's daughter, a high-society bride, and she was hauling her own bags like a servant while her husband walked away with a beautiful stranger. By the time she reached the heavy oak double doors of the penthouse suite, Mona was physically exhausted and emotionally frantic. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, but she desperately fought them back. "There has to be an explanation," she told herself, trying to steady her breathing. "He's stressed. I just need to talk to him. I just need to be a good wife." She swiped the keycard. The light blinked green. If you are enjoying the psychological twists, the heartbreak, and the ultimate betrayal of Luis Mona, welcome to Afro-Korean Diaries. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because you do not want to miss the jaw-dropping secrets we are about to uncover. Let's get back to the penthouse. Mona pushed the heavy doors open, dragging the luggage into the suite. The penthouse was a sprawling masterpiece of modern luxury, with floor-to-ceiling glass windows offering a panoramic, moonlit view of the crashing ocean below. But Mona didn't notice the view. Her eyes locked instantly on the scene in the center of the sunken living room. Do-jin was sitting on a plush velvet sofa, a glass of dark amber liquor in his hand. His jacket was discarded, his tie loosened, the top 2 buttons of his crisp white shirt undone. The woman in the crimson dress was straddling his lap. She was laughing, a high, melodic sound, trailing her manicured fingernails down Do-jin's chest. Do-jin was leaning back, completely relaxed, watching the woman with an amused glint in his eye. Mona's luggage slipped from her trembling hands, crashing onto the hardwood floor. The sound echoed sharply. Do-jin's gaze shifted lazily from the woman's face, slowly dragging across the room to land on Mona. He didn't jump. He didn't push the woman off. He didn't even look mildly apologetic. He looked at Mona the way one might look at an insect that had wandered indoors. "You took long enough," Do-jin stated coldly. He took a slow sip of his drink, his dark eyes locking onto her horrified, tear-filled gaze. "Put the bags in the guest room down the hall. You sleep there, and keep the door shut. We don't want you to distract us." Mona's knees buckled. A choked, agonizing sob ripped from her throat as she stared at the man she loved more than life itself. The man who had promised to protect her. As the first tear spilled over her eyelashes, shattering her fragile world, Do-jin watched her break, and behind his cold, dead eyes, a terrifying, vengeful satisfaction finally began to bloom. Chapter 2: The Nightmare. The morning sun bled through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the penthouse, casting long, mocking beams of golden light across the empty master bed. Mona slowly opened her swollen eyes. The silk sheets were freezing cold against her skin. She reached out her hand instinctively, her fingers brushing against the empty space beside her. Do-jin? She whispered, her voice cracking in her unconscious state. She just had a sweet dream of Do-jin making love to her. As she opened her eyes fully, she realized it was all a dream. Mona sat up, her head pounding with a severe ache. She looked around the massive, impeccably clean room. Do-jin's travel bags were still by the closet, but his jacket was gone. The heavy scent of his expensive cologne was completely masked by something else, the sickeningly sweet, floral perfume of the woman in the crimson dress. Mona pulled her knees to her chest and let out a broken sob. She had cried herself to sleep on the guest room floor last night, but somehow she had woken up in the master bed. Did he carry her here? Was it all just a terrible nightmare? She pushed the covers off and walked barefoot out of the bedroom. Do-jin? She called out louder. Are you here? The penthouse was empty. The glass coffee table where the woman had sat was spotless. Mona walked into the massive, marble-covered kitchen. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten anything since the wedding reception. She opened the giant silver refrigerator and brought out some eggs, bread, and milk. As she whisked the eggs in a glass bowl, a tear slipped down her cheek and landed in the mixture. Stop crying, she told herself out loud, wiping her face aggressively. You are a billionaire's wife now. You have to be strong. Maybe he is just stressed. Yes, that is it. The company merger must be stressing him out. Just as she placed the frying pan on the stove, her phone began to ring from the living room counter. The loud, cheerful ringtone made her jump. She rushed over, wiping her hands on a towel. The caller ID flashed brightly. Mom Redheart. Mona took a deep, shaky breath. She slapped her cheeks lightly to bring some color into them and cleared her throat, forcing the brightest, happiest tone she could manage. Good morning, Mom. Mona answered, gripping the edge of the marble counter for support. My beautiful daughter. Madame Helena Jin's voice boomed through the speaker, filled with warmth and excitement. Oh, it is so good to hear your voice. I have been looking at the wedding pictures all morning. The society blogs are going crazy over how handsome Do-jin looked kissing you at the altar. Mona closed her eyes, the memory of that kiss feeling like a knife twisting in her chest. Yes, Mom. The pictures are beautiful. There was a brief pause on the line. Helena's tone shifted from excited to carefully observant. Mona, are you all right? You sound breathless. Did I wake you two up? No, Mom. You didn't wake us up? Mona said quickly, letting out a fake, breathless laugh. I am just in the kitchen. I was making breakfast for us. Ah, the dutiful wife already? Helena chuckled, though there was still a hint of suspicion in her voice. Where is my son-in-law? Put him on the phone. I need to warn him not to keep you locked in that penthouse all day. The island has beautiful private beaches. Panic seized Mona's throat. He is in the shower right now, Mom. The water is running, so he won't be able to hear you. I see, Helena said slowly. The background noise on the phone quieted down as if Helena had walked into a private room. Mona, listen to me carefully. I am your mother, and I've watched you grow into the woman you are today. I know your heart. Your voice is shaking. Tell me the truth. Is Do-jin treating you well? Did you two have a fight on your first night? Mom, please don't overthink, Mona pleaded, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. Everything is absolutely perfect. The resort is breathtaking. The ocean view from our room is like a painting. I don't care about the ocean view, Mona. I care about how he looks at you when the cameras are off. Helena pressed gently. If he is being difficult, you tell me. I did not hand my precious daughter over to the Beck family for her to be treated like an afterthought. He is wonderful, Mom, Mona lied, staring at the empty, cold living room. He is so loving. He just has a lot of work on his mind. You know how the company is. Helena let out a long, heavy sigh. All right, if you say you are fine, then I will believe you. But remember what I told you before you left, Mona. Marriage is not a fairy tale. It requires patience. Do-jin has a cold exterior, but he chose you. Do not give up at the first sign of a storm. Promise me. I promise, Mom, Mona whispered, a fresh tear escaping her eye. Good girl. Enjoy your breakfast. And give Do-jin my love. I will. Bye, Mom. Mona ended the call and let the phone drop onto the counter. She slid down the side of the kitchen cabinets until she hit the floor, burying her face in her hands. Her mother's words echoed in her head. Do not give up at the first sign of a storm. She stood back up and finished making her breakfast. The scrambled eggs tasted like ash in her mouth. After forcing herself to eat, she picked up her phone again. She dialed Do-jin's number. Ring, ring, ring. The number you are trying to reach is currently unavailable. Please leave a message. Mona bit her lip. Hi, Do-jin, she said into the voicemail, her voice soft and pleading. It is Mona. I woke up and you weren't here. I made some breakfast. Please call me back when you get this. I just want to know that you are okay. I love you. She hung up. 30 minutes later, she called again. No answer. An hour passed. 2 hours. By noon, the silence in the penthouse was driving her completely insane. The walls felt like they were closing in on her. She couldn't just sit there and wait for a husband who might not even return. She walked into the bedroom and changed into a simple, flowing white sundress and a wide-brimmed straw hat. She needed fresh air. She needed to cool her burning head. Mona took the private elevator down to the resort's lobby. The staff bowed respectfully as she passed, but she kept her head down, ashamed. She felt like everyone knew. She felt like they could all see the invisible humiliation stamped on her forehead. She walked out the glass doors and down the wooden boardwalk leading to the private VIP beach. The sand was pure white, and the water was crystal clear, shining like diamonds under the afternoon sun. Mona found a secluded spot under a large, white canvas umbrella. She sat down on the padded lounge chair, staring blankly at the waves. Excuse me, ma'am? A cheerful voice interrupted her thoughts. Mona looked up. A young resort waitress in a crisp uniform was standing there, holding a tray with a fresh coconut drink decorated with a pink hibiscus flower. Compliments of the resort, Mrs. Beck. The waitress smiled warmly. We saw you walking down alone. Is your husband joining you soon? We can set up a private cabana lunch for the two of you if you'd like. Mona forced a polite, tight smile. Thank you. And no, my husband won't be joining me. He is resting upstairs. He had a very long flight. The waitress giggled, a slight blush on her cheeks. Oh, of course. Honeymoon exhaustion. We see it all the time. Well, enjoy the view, ma'am. Let me know if you need anything else. As the waitress walked away, Mona felt a sharp pang of jealousy. Honeymoon exhaustion. If only that were true. If only Do-jin was upstairs sleeping in their bed because he loved her too much the night before. Instead, he had brought another woman. Mona pulled her knees to her chest under the shade of the umbrella. The cool ocean breeze kissed her skin, but it brought her no comfort. Her mind raced with a million questions. What did I do? She whispered to the wind. Did I say something wrong at the altar? Did I look ugly in my nightgown? Why would he promise to protect me in front of God and my mother, only to look at me with such disgust hours later? She remembered the way his eyes looked when he told her she was just a transaction. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep-rooted hatred. But how could someone hate her so much when she has never offended him? Mona stayed on the beach for hours. She watched the sun slowly begin its descent, turning the sky into breathtaking shades of purple and orange. Couples walked by on the shoreline, holding hands and laughing. Every time she saw a tall man with dark hair, her heart skipped a beat. hoping it was Do-jin coming to find her, to apologize, to tell her it was all a sick joke. But he never came. When the evening chill began to set in, Mona finally stood up and brushed the sand off her dress. She took a deep breath. She made a decision. She was not going to be a victim. Her mother told her to fight for her marriage, and that is exactly what she was going to do. She marched back up to the penthouse with a renewed sense of purpose. "I will win him over," she told herself as the elevator dinged on her floor. "I will be the perfect wife. I will show him that I am worthy of his love." Mona went straight to the kitchen. She picked up the intercom phone and called the resort's concierge. "Hello, Mrs. Baek. How can we assist you this evening?" The polite voice answered immediately. "Hi," Mona said, trying to sound confident. "I need some fresh ingredients sent up to the penthouse right away. I am making dinner for my husband." "Right away, ma'am. Our private chef can prepare." "No," Mona interrupted firmly. "I want to cook it myself. Please send up fresh beef ribs, soy sauce, garlic, sesame oil, and whatever fresh vegetables you have. I am making galbi-jim." "Excellent choice, ma'am. We will send the ingredients up in 10 minutes. Mona tied an apron around her waist. She knew Do-jin loved galbi-jim, braised short ribs. When they were dating before the wedding, he had mentioned that it was the only meal that reminded him of a happy childhood. She had secretly learned how to make it perfectly just for him. When the ingredients arrived, Mona threw herself into the cooking. It gave her hands something to do. It stopped her mind from racing. She carefully marinated the beef, chopped the carrots and radishes into perfect, uniform pieces, and let the rich, savory stew simmer on the stove. The penthouse began to smell like a real home. The delicious aroma filled the cold, empty rooms. By 8 p.m., the food was ready. Mona set the grand dining table. She lit 2 tall, white candles. She arranged the side dishes perfectly. Then, she went into the bedroom, took a quick shower, and changed into a beautiful, modest silk nightgown. She applied a little bit of lip gloss and brushed her hair until it shone. She walked back out to the dining room and sat down in her chair. "He will come home," she told herself. "He will smell the food. He will see that I am trying, and his heart will soften." 9 p.m. Mona watched the flames of the candles flicker. The food was getting cold. "Maybe he got lost on the island," she reasoned, picking up her phone to call him again. It went straight to voicemail. 10 p.m. The candles had burned down halfway. Mona's stomach was growling loudly, but she refused to take a single bite without her husband. 11:30 p.m. Mona rested her head on the edge of the dining table. Her eyes were heavy. She had cried so much the night before, and the emotional exhaustion was finally catching up to her. "Where are you, Do-jin?" she mumbled into the polished mahogany wood of the table. By 1 a.m., the candles completely burned out, leaving the dining room in dark, shadowy moonlight. The food was stone cold. The fat on the beef ribs had hardened into a white, unappetizing layer. Mona couldn't sit in the dining chair anymore. Her back ached. She slowly stood up, blew out the smoking wicks of the dead candles, and walked over to the massive velvet couch in the living room. She curled up into a small ball, pulling a decorative throw blanket over her shoulders. The penthouse was so quiet it felt like a tomb. As her eyes fluttered shut, her last thought before sleep took over was a desperate prayer that when she woke up, the nightmare would be over. "Hey guys, I pour my absolute heart and soul into writing these emotional roller coasters for you. But I'll be honest, it's been really tough keeping this channel going lately. The algorithm hasn't been kind, and I am trying so hard not to give up. If Mona's pain made you feel something, if you are rooting for her to find happiness, please take 1 second to hit that subscribe button. Costs you absolutely nothing, but it means the entire world to me. It is the only way I can keep bringing Afro-Korean diaries to life. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support. Now, let's see what happens to Mona next." Splash! A violent, freezing shock tore through Mona's body. She gasped, her eyes flying open in sheer panic. Her lungs seized as the icy water soaked through her silk nightgown, chilling her straight to the bone. She pushed herself up, coughing and sputtering, wiping her dripping hair out of her eyes to see who had attacked her. Standing over her, breathing heavily with a face twisted in pure, unadulterated rage, was Do-jin. He was wearing the same clothes from the morning, but his shirt was wrinkled and unbuttoned. In his hand, he held a silver ice bucket from the minibar, tipping the last few freezing drops onto her shivering body. What are you doing?" Mona cried out, her teeth chattering uncontrollably as she hugged herself. "Why are you sleeping in my living room?" Do-jin roared, his deep voice echoing violently off the glass windows. Mona shrank back against the armrest of the couch, terrified of the man standing before her. I was waiting for you. I made dinner." Do-jin threw the heavy silver ice bucket. It crashed loudly against the hardwood floor, making Mona scream and cover her head. "Did I ask you to make dinner?" Do-jin yelled, stepping closer until he was towering over her trembling form. He pointed a long, accusing finger at her. "Are you trying to stain my expensive couch with your wet, disgusting hair? You are smelling like a pathetic beggar, Mona. Do-jin, please, get out of my sight," he bellowed, his eyes wide and manic. "I do not want to look at your face. Move." Mona didn't hesitate. Pure survival instinct took over. She scrambled off the soaked couch, slipping slightly on the wet floor, and ran. She ran down the long hallway, her bare feet slapping against the cold wood, until she reached the guest quarters. She slammed the door shut and locked it, collapsing with her back against the wood. She slid down to the floor, pulling her freezing, soaked knees to her chest. She couldn't stop shaking. The cold water clung to her skin, but the coldness in Do-jin's eyes was what truly froze her heart. She buried her face in her hands and let out a loud, agonizing wail. She cried for her mother. She cried for Nia. She cried for the beautiful wedding that had turned into a literal hell. She sat there crying for 20 agonizing minutes. She felt like garbage. She felt completely worthless. Suddenly, the handle of the guest room door rattled violently. Mona gasped, holding her breath. Bang, bang, bang. Do-jin kicked the door heavily from the other side. "Mona," he yelled through the wood. "Please, Do-jin, just leave me alone," she sobbed. "Open this door right now," he commanded, shaking in fear, knowing that ignoring him would only make his anger worse. Mona slowly unlocked the door and pulled it open. Do-jin stood in the doorway, his chest heaving. He looked at her tear-stained face, her shivering body, and her ruined silk nightgown. Not a single ounce of pity crossed his features. He pointed down the hallway toward the living room. "Go and clean up the mess in the sitting room," he ordered, his voice dropping to a deadly, quiet whisper. "Right now." Mona looked up at him, her lips trembling. She wanted to say no. She wanted to scream that he was the one who threw the water. But the fear paralyzed her vocal cords. She nodded her head like an obedient, terrified dog. She walked past him, keeping her head bowed, and hurried to the utility closet to grab a towel. As she dropped to her hands and knees in the living room and began wiping the freezing water off the expensive hardwood floor, she heard Do-jin's slow, deliberate footsteps approaching behind her. The real torture was only just beginning. Chapter 3: The Bitter Taste of Tears. Mona's bare knees ached against the hard marble floor. Her hands were completely numb from the freezing water as she squeezed the soaked towel into the silver ice bucket. Every time she moved, her wet silk nightgown clung to her shivering skin, making her feel completely exposed and vulnerable. Do-jin did not leave the room. He stood right there, a few feet away, watching her. He had his hands deep in the pockets of his dark trousers. His broad shoulders blocked the moonlight coming from the window. Mona kept her head down, her dark hair falling over her face to hide her falling tears. She scrubbed the floor aggressively, desperate to finish the humiliating task and run back to her room. "You missed a spot." Do-jin's voice cut through the heavy silence. It was cold, flat, and completely devoid of emotion. Mona stopped scrubbing. She looked at the floor in front of him. There was barely a drop of water there. But she didn't argue. She dragged her bruised knees forward and wiped the dry spot with her damp towel. Is this okay? Mona whispered, her voice trembling so badly she could barely form the words. She slowly looked up at him, her large, tear-filled eyes begging for a single ounce of mercy. Do-jin looked down at her. For a split second, a muscle feathered in his jaw. But his eyes remained like dark, empty pits. "Do not look at me with those pathetic eyes," he spat. "You think crying will make me pity you? You think acting weak will erase what you are. What am I?" Mona cried out, unable to hold it in anymore. She dropped the wet towel. "Please, Do-jin, tell me what I did. If I made a mistake, tell me so I can fix it. I am your wife." "You are nothing," Do-jin answered sharply. He stepped closer, the tip of his expensive leather shoe almost touching her bare knee. "You are a plague. You are a mistake that I am going to correct. Now get up." Mona quickly scrambled to her feet, hugging her arms tightly around her freezing chest. She kept her head bowed, terrified of making eye contact again. "I smelled food when I walked in," Do-jin said lazily, turning his back on her to walk toward the large dining table. He pulled out the heavy mahogany chair at the head of the table and sat down, crossing his long legs. "You said you made dinner. Bring it to me. I am hungry." Mona blinked in surprise. Her heart gave a sudden, foolish flutter of hope. "He wants to eat my food?" she thought. "Maybe he is just hungry and cranky. My mother always said a hungry man is an angry man. If he eats the galbi-jim, maybe his mood will change." Yes, right away," Mona said quickly. She wiped her wet face with the back of her hand and rushed into the kitchen. The food had been sitting cold for hours, so she quickly turned on the stove to warm it up. As she stirred the rich, savory stew of braised short ribs, she looked down at her red, irritated hands. She had added crushed pine nuts to the sauce the traditional way Do-jin loved it. Before she had prepared the dish earlier that evening, she had stood in this very kitchen and whispered to herself, "I am highly allergic to these, but I have to make it perfect for him. I am doing this out of love." She had accidentally touched the crushed nuts with her bare hands while cooking, earning an agonizing bout of scratching that left her fingers and palms raw and burning. But she had ignored the pain, hoping her sacrifice would win his heart. She carefully arranged the meat on a beautiful ceramic plate. She scooped a fresh bowl of steaming white rice. She placed the side dishes, kimchi, pickled radishes, and seasoned spinach, on a silver tray. She took a deep breath, smoothing down her ruined, wet nightgown, and walked out of the kitchen with a small, hopeful smile on her face. "Do-jin, I warmed it up for." Mona stopped dead in her tracks. The silver tray rattled in her shaking hands. Do-jin was not alone at the dining table anymore. Sitting right next to him, her chair pulled so close their legs were touching, was the woman. Gina. Gina was wearing a very short, extremely revealing silk slip dress that left nothing to the imagination. Her dark hair was perfectly styled, and her lips were painted a bright, seductive red. She had a glass of expensive red wine in one hand, and her other hand was resting intimately on Do-jin's thigh. Mona felt like the ground had just opened up and swallowed her whole. Her hopeful smile crashed into a million pieces. She stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the woman who had ruined her arrival at the resort. Gina slowly turned her head and looked at Mona. A loud, wicked laugh erupted from Gina's red lips. "Oh my goodness, Do-jin," Gina giggled, pointing a manicured finger at Mona. "Is this the maid? Why is she dripping wet? Did she fall into the toilet?" Mona's jaw trembled. She looked at Do-jin, silently begging him to defend her. But Do-jin just picked up his wineglass and took a slow sip. "She is the one who cooked," Do-jin said calmly. "Bring the food to the table, Mona." Mona forced her legs to move. She reached the table and gently placed the hot plate of galbi-jim and the side dishes down. Gina leaned over the table, sniffing the food dramatically. She immediately wrinkled her nose in disgust and waved her hand in front of her face. What is that smell?" Gina complained loudly. "It smells like absolute garbage. What makes you think my man would eat this disgusting food you made?" "It is galbi-jim," Mona whispered, a tear escaping her eye. It is his favorite. His favorite. Gina scoffed, poking the tender meat aggressively. Do-jin only eats food prepared by top-class Michelin star chefs. He doesn't eat trash prepared by a wet, shivering street dog. Mona couldn't take it anymore. She covered her mouth with her hand, a quiet sob escaping her lips. She turned around to run back to her room. Did I say you could leave? Do-jin's voice cracked through the room like a whip. Mona froze. She slowly turned back around, her chest heaving. Please, Do-jin, she begged. Please let me go to my room. Pull out that chair, Do-jin commanded, pointing to the chair directly opposite them. Sit at this table and eat that food yourself. Mona shook her head frantically, tears flying from her face. I can't. Please, I feel sick. And the pine nuts, Do-jin. I touched them earlier and my hands broke out. You know I am highly allergic. If I eat this, it will hurt me. Do-jin slammed his hand flat on the table, making the plates jump. His eyes turned into dark, violent storms. He knew exactly what she was allergic to, and he didn't care. I said, sit down and eat, he roared, or I will make you eat it off the floor. My beautiful viewers, my heart is completely breaking for Mona right now. He is forcing her to eat something she is allergic to. This is pure wickedness. If you hate how Do-jin and Gina are treating our innocent Mona, please show your support by hitting that subscribe button right now. Let's stand with Mona. Terrified out of her mind, Mona rushed to the chair and sat down clumsily. Her raw, irritated hands were shaking so badly she could barely pick up the silver chopsticks. Eat, Do-jin ordered softly, leaning back into his chair. Mona picked up a piece of the beef covered in the nut-lace sauce and put it in her mouth. Every swallow felt like swallowing broken glass. Almost immediately, the severe allergic reaction kicked in. Hot, red, angry rashes violently broke out across Mona's neck, her chest, and her bare arms. An unbearable, burning itch spread over her entire body like wildfire. Mona gasped, her throat feeling tight. She dropped her chopsticks and began to scratch her own skin frantically. Her nails dug deep into her flesh, leaving angry red marks as she desperately tried to relieve the agonizing sensation. She couldn't stop. She scratched herself like a desperate, miserable dog, her breath hitching in pure discomfort as she forced herself to keep chewing the toxic food just to please him. As Mona suffered through her punishment meal, scratching her skin raw, Do-jin completely ignored her pain. He turned all his attention to Gina. You must be hungry from the flight, baby? Do-jin said softly to the mistress. I am, Gina pouted playfully. She picked up a fresh strawberry from a fruit bowl on the table, bit the tip off, and held it up to Do-jin's lips. Bite it, she whispered seductively. Do-jin leaned forward and took the strawberry from her fingers with his teeth, his lips brushing against her fingertips. Mona squeezed her eyes shut, digging her nails into her itchy arms. You are so handsome tonight, Gina giggled, running her hands through Do-jin's thick hair. She leaned in and kissed his neck. This honeymoon suite is amazing. The bed in the master room is so huge, and the sheets are so soft. Are they? Do-jin replied smoothly, his eyes briefly flickering over to Mona to watch her scratch her inflamed skin. We will have to test how soft they really are tonight. Mona choked on her food, coughing violently. Her chest burned from the allergy and the absolute, physical pain in her heart. She was sitting at the same table, hurting her own body, while her husband planned to sleep with another woman in their marital bed. Oh, look at her, Gina mocked, laughing loudly at Mona's miserable state. She eats like a pig, and now she is scratching herself like a dirty street dog with fleas. Seriously, Do-jin, where did you find this creature? She was a charity case, Do-jin said coldly. Madame Helena begged me to take her off her hands. She is a burden to everyone who knows her. The word burden echoed in the room. Mona didn't know why, but that specific word felt like a sharp needle piercing her amnesiac brain. Mona forced the last bite into her mouth, tears of physical and emotional agony streaming down her face. She dropped the chopsticks. I am finished, she whispered, her voice completely broken and raspy from the allergic reaction. Good. Now sit there and wait until we are done. Mona sat there like a statue, still rubbing her irritated skin. She watched for 30 agonizing minutes as the man she loved gave another woman the affection he had promised to her. Finally, Do-jin stood up. He didn't say a word to Mona. He reached down, wrapped his strong arms around Gina's waist, and lifted her up effortlessly. Gina wrapped her legs around his waist, throwing her head back and laughing as Do-jin carried her away. Mona watched them walk down the long, dark hallway. Please close the door, she prayed silently. Do-jin reached the master bedroom. He walked inside with Gina in his arms, and he left the door open, just a crack. Mona covered her mouth with both hands. She wanted to run, but her legs were paralyzed. A few minutes passed. Then the sounds began. It started with a low, breathless giggle from Gina. Then the heavy creak of the expensive mattress springs. Thump, thump, thump. Yes. Right there, Gina moaned loudly, her voice echoing violently through the empty penthouse. Continue, Do-jin. Faster. Mona completely broke down. She fell out of the dining chair, collapsing onto her hands and knees. She pressed her raw, rash-covered hands flat against her ears, pushing as hard as she could to block out the sounds, but it was useless. She wept with an intensity that physically hurt her ribs. She cried until her vision went completely black and blurry. She lay flat on the floor, her wet nightgown sticking to the hardwood, feeling like she was dying from the inside out. I can't do this, Mona sobbed into the floorboards, her skin burning and her heart shattering. I can't stay here. I will die if I stay here. If you want Mona to gather her strength, pack her bags, and leave this toxic monster, please type, "Leave Mona," in the comment section below. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. We need a massive community to support Mona through this heartbreak. Let's finish this agonizing night. Mona didn't know how long she lay on the floor. The sounds from the bedroom eventually faded into silence. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up from the ground. She wiped her swollen eyes, still scratching absent-mindedly at the red bumps on her arms. She walked quietly down the hallway, slipping into the guest room and locking the door behind her. Mona walked over to her beautiful, untouched bridal suitcases. She unzipped the largest one and threw the lid open. Without caring about folding anything properly, she started grabbing her clothes from the closet and throwing them into the bag. I am leaving, Mona whispered to the empty room, her voice finally steadying with a cold, desperate resolve. I don't care what my mother says. I don't care about the family name. I am leaving this place tomorrow morning, and I am never coming back. She zipped the heavy suitcase shut and dragged it to the door, placing it right by the handle. She lay down on the cold floor right next to her suitcase, wrapping her arms around it. She was ready to face her mother's disappointment. She was ready for anything, as long as it meant she never had to look into Baek Do-jin's cruel, empty eyes ever again. But as the first rays of morning light began to peek through the curtains, Mona had no idea that escaping him was going to be completely impossible. Chapter 4. The Trap of Rose Petals. The morning sun filtered through the small window of the guest room, casting a pale, unforgiving light over Mona's exhausted face. She woke up with a stiff neck and a pounding headache from sleeping on the hard floor right next to her packed suitcase. For a few seconds, her mind was completely blank. Then, the horrific memories of the previous night, the freezing water, the degrading dinner, the agonizing moans from the master bedroom, came crashing down on her like a ton of bricks. Mona sat up immediately. She didn't cry this time. Her tears had completely dried up in the middle of the night, replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness. She stood up and smoothed down her wrinkled dress. She grabbed the handle of her heavy suitcase. Her heart was beating fast, but her mind was completely made up. She was leaving. She didn't care if she had to walk all the way to the airport. She was not spending another minute in this hell. I am Mona, she whispered to herself, taking a deep, shaky breath. I am not a maid. I am not a punching bag. She unlocked the guest room door very slowly, wincing as the hinges gave a slight creak. She poked her head out into the hallway. It was completely silent. There was no sound of Gina's annoying, high-pitched laughter. There was no sound of Do-jin's deep, terrifying voice. Mona gripped her suitcase tightly and tiptoed down the long hallway toward the main living area. She kept her eyes fixed on the front door. Just a few more steps, she told herself. Just get to the elevator, call a taxi, and don't look back. But as she stepped into the massive living room, she froze dead in her tracks. Her suitcase slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a loud, echoing thud. The living room was completely transformed. The expensive hardwood floors were covered in thousands of deep red rose petals. There were thick, white pillar candles placed carefully around the room, giving off a soft, romantic glow despite the morning sunlight pouring through the windows. The freezing water she had been forced to clean up last night was a distant memory. Hanging from the high ceiling, draped beautifully across the large glass windows, was a massive, professionally printed banner. Mona's eyes widened in absolute shock as she read the words written in bold, golden letters, "Please forgive me, wifey." Before Mona could even process what she was looking at, she heard a soft rustling sound. She looked down at the center of the room. Right there, in the middle of a massive heart shape made entirely of rose petals, was the cold, untouchable billionaire, Baek Do-jin. He was kneeling on the hard floor. He wasn't wearing his expensive, intimidating suit. He was wearing a simple, white linen shirt and comfortable sweatpants, making him look surprisingly soft, approachable, and deeply vulnerable. His head was bowed deeply, and both of his hands were raised, tightly gripping his own ears. A traditional, deeply humble gesture of apology and submission. "Do-jin," Mona whispered, her voice barely leaving her throat. She looked around frantically, expecting Gina to pop out from behind a sofa and laugh at her. What is this? Where is that woman?" Do-jin slowly lifted his head. His dark eyes were red and slightly swollen, as if he had been agonizing all night. He looked at Mona with an expression of pure, desperate regret. "She is gone, Mona," Do-jin said softly, his voice cracking with emotion. "I sent her away early this morning. I didn't sleep with her. I couldn't do it." Mona took a step back, her chest heaving as anger finally pierced through her shock. "Don't lie to me. I heard you. I heard both of you laughing and she was moaning." Do-jin let go of his ears and crawled forward on his knees, ignoring his pride, stopping just a few feet away from her. He looked up at her, a single tear escaping his eye and rolling down his handsome cheek. "It was an act, Mona. It was a sick, twisted, theatrical act. I paid her to make those noises. I sat in a chair by the window the entire time. I swear on my life, I didn't touch a single hair on her head." Mona shook her head violently, completely confused and overwhelmed. "Why? Why would you do that to me? Why would you pour cold water on me? Why would you make me eat food that you are well aware that I am allergic to? Why would you try to cause me pain?" Do-jin buried his face in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking as a loud, painful sob tore from his throat. The sight of this powerful, intimidating man breaking down and crying on the floor completely shattered Mona's defenses. She had never seen a man look so broken. "Because I am terrified, Mona," Do-jin wept, looking up at her with desperate, pleading eyes. "I have been hurt so badly in my past. The people I loved the most destroyed me. They used me, they betrayed me, and they left me with scars that nobody can see. When I look at you, when I see how pure and sweet you are, it terrifies me to my core." Mona's breath hitched. "My love terrifies you?" "Yes," Do-jin cried out, hitting his own chest with a clenched fist. "Because I don't know how to live yet. I don't know how to accept love without expecting it to turn into a weapon. Last night I panicked. I wanted to push you away before you could have the chance to break my heart. So I brought that woman here to build a wall between us. I wanted to make you hate me so I wouldn't have to be vulnerable." He reached out and gently grabbed the hem of Mona's dress, looking up at her like a dying man looking at water. "But when I saw you lying on the floor, crying, it killed me. I realized that pushing you away is the biggest mistake of my life. I am a fool, Mona. I am a damaged, stupid man. Please, I am begging you, don't leave me alone in the dark. Mona looked down at him. Her heart was at war. Her mind screamed at her to pick up her suitcase and run out the door. But her gentle, amnesiac heart, the heart that only knew how to be kind and empathetic, ached for him. She remembered her mother's words on the phone. Marriage requires patience. Do not give up at the first sign of a storm. Slowly, Mona let go of the suitcase handle. She dropped down to her knees right in front of him, right in the middle of the rose petals. You really didn't touch her? Mona whispered, her voice trembling as she searched his eyes for the truth. I didn't, Do-jin swore, gazing deeply into her eyes with intense sincerity. You are the only woman I want. Please forgive me, wifey. Give me a chance to show you the man you actually married. Mona reached out, her small, trembling fingers gently wiping the tear from his cheek. Do-jin, please don't ever hurt me like that again. I almost died of a broken heart last night. Do-jin wrapped his strong arms around her waist and pulled her tightly against his chest, burying his face in her neck. Never again, he whispered passionately into her skin. I promise you, Mona, never again. Guys, I am literally screaming at my screen right now. Has this man really changed? Or is he using her sweet, forgiving heart against her? Are you falling for his tears? Or do you know he is playing a wicked game? If you can't wait to see what this man is up to, please hit that subscribe button right now. We need a massive army to protect Mona from what is coming. Your subscription is the only way I can keep bringing you these daily chapters. So please use your number 6, don't let my channel sink, and join the family. Let's see what this loving husband does next. The rest of the morning felt like a completely different reality. It was as if the nightmare of the previous night had been washed away by the ocean waves. After they wiped away their tears, Do-jin ordered the resort staff to clear out the suitcases and prepare a massive, luxurious breakfast on the private balcony overlooking the sea. He pulled out Mona's chair for her, poured her fresh orange juice, and fed her fresh strawberries with his own fingers. He looked at her with such adoration and warmth that Mona's cheeks were constantly flushed pink. Let's go down to the beach, Do-jin suggested with a bright, breathtaking smile. Looking completely transformed from the monster he was hours ago, they spent the entire afternoon under the tropical sun. Do-jin was the absolute perfect, loving husband. They walked hand in hand along the shoreline, the warm water splashing against their ankles. When Mona got tired, Do-jin laughed, swept her up into his strong arms, and carried her right into the ocean. Mona squealed with joy, splashing water at his chest. Do-jin caught her hands, pulled her flush against his wet body, and kissed her deeply under the sunlight. For the first time since she woke up in that hospital bed 2 years ago, Mona felt completely alive. She felt safe. She felt like she belonged to someone who truly cherished her. As the sun began to set, they returned to the penthouse. Do-jin had arranged for a private violinist to play soft, romantic music while they ate a candlelit dinner. He didn't let her lift a single finger. He served her food, complimented her beauty, and listened intently as she talked about her dreams. I always wanted to open a small flower shop one day, Mona said softly, swirling the wine in her glass. Nothing too big, just a quiet place where I can make people smile. You can have anything you want, my love, Do-jin replied, reaching across the table to hold her hand. I will buy you the biggest shop in Seoul. When the night finally fell, Do-jin took her hand and led her down the hallway toward the master bedroom. Mona's heart fluttered nervously. The memory of the horrible sounds from last night still lingered in her mind. But as Do-jin opened the door, the room was dimly lit, smelling of fresh lavender and clean linen. There was no trace of Gina left. He turned to her, his dark eyes filled with an intense, burning desire. He gently cupped her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. You are so beautiful, he murmured, his voice a deep rumble that sent shivers down her spine. That night, Do-jin made love to her. There was no cruelty. There was no coldness. He was incredibly gentle, treating her body like it was made of fragile glass. He worshipped every inch of her, whispering sweet, breathless promises into her ear. He made her feel entirely consumed by his love. As Mona lay in his arms afterward, listening to the steady beat of his heart in the quiet room, tears of pure happiness slipped from her eyes. She felt a profound, overwhelming bond with him. It was the best feeling of her entire life. She was finally his wife in every sense of the word. She drifted to sleep with a smile on her face, completely unaware that the man holding her was staring at the ceiling with eyes as cold and calculating as a predator. Hold on, hold on. Do you all know what is going on here? Who else is feeling that heavy knot in their stomach right now? If you know Do-jin has truly repented, drop a face-blowing a kiss in the comments. And seriously guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe to support the channel and let's get back to the drama. The next morning, Mona woke up to the feeling of soft kisses trailing down her bare shoulder. She giggled, keeping her eyes closed as Do-jin's arms wrapped tightly around her waist, pulling her back against his warm chest. Good morning, beautiful, Do-jin whispered, kissing the side of her neck. Good morning, Mona beamed, turning around in his arms to face him. She traced his jawline affectionately. Did you sleep well? I slept perfectly, he smiled, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. But we have a problem. Mona's eyes widened slightly in panic. What problem? The problem is that I don't want to get out of this bed. I want to stay right here with you all day, he teased, playfully biting her nose. Mona laughed, a light, musical sound that filled the room. Suddenly, the loud ringing of her phone on the bedside table interrupted their perfect bubble. Mona reached over and grabbed it. It was her best friend, Nia. Hello, Mona answered happily. Mona, bestie. Nia's loud, energetic voice blasted through the speaker. I am looking at my calendar, and it says my favorite couple is supposed to be returning from their honeymoon tomorrow. Tell me it's true. I miss you so much. Mona smiled, looking down at Do-jin, who was currently tracing lazy circles on her stomach. Yes, Nia. We are coming back tomorrow. Thank God, Nia exclaimed. I will be at the airport to pick you up with Madame Helena. So, tell me everything. How is the island? Is Do-jin treating you like a queen? Or do I need to fly over there and beat him up? Mona blushed deeply, covering her face with her free hand. Nia, stop it. Everything is... It is perfect. He is perfect. I am so happy. On the other end of the line, Nia let out a dramatic sigh of relief. Oh, that makes me so happy to hear, Mona. I was worried the billionaire lifestyle would make him too stiff. I am so glad you guys are having a romantic time. Enjoy your last day. Okay? I will see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, Nia, Mona said, hanging up the phone. She turned back to Do-jin, who was looking at her with an amused expression. Your friend is very protective of you, he noted. She is like a sister to me, Mona explained softly. You know I don't have any family from my past. Nia and my mother are the only ones I have. Well, you have me now, Do-jin said smoothly, sitting up and pulling the sheets with him. And since it is our last full day on the island, we are going to make it count. That morning, Do-jin didn't let Mona breathe. He made love to her again, non-stop, with a fiery passion that left her completely dizzy and exhausted in the best way possible. After they finally got out of bed and took a shower together, Do-jin surprised her. He had a private luxury car waiting downstairs. Where are we going? Mona asked as he opened the car door for her. Shopping, Do-jin declared. He took her to the most exclusive, high-end designer boutiques on the island. He bought her everything her eyes lingered on. Diamond necklaces, custom-made dresses, expensive Italian shoes, and matching designer handbags. Mona tried to stop him, telling him it was too much, but Do-jin just kissed her and handed over his black card. Nothing is too much for my wife, he insisted loudly enough for the shop attendants to hear, making them sigh in envy. Mona felt like she was floating on a cloud. Every single doubt, Every single fear she had experienced on their first night was completely gone. She believed his apology entirely. The next day came entirely too quickly. Mona stood in the penthouse, looking at the packed suitcases with a sad pout on her face. She didn't want to go back to Seoul. She didn't want to return to the real world where Do-jin had to run a massive corporation. She just wanted to stay in this honeymoon bubble forever. "Do we really have to leave?" Mona asked, wrapping her arms around Do-jin's waist from behind as he buttoned up his crisp white dress shirt. Do-jin turned around and kissed her forehead. "I'm sorry, my love, but there is a massive merger happening at the company, and it needs my urgent attention. I promise, as soon as things settle down, I will take you anywhere in the world you want to go. Paris? Milan? Just name it." Mona smiled brightly. "As long as I am with you, I don't care where we go." "Good girl," Do-jin said, patting her cheek. "I am going to arrange for the luggage to be taken down to the jet. Go fix your makeup. You have a little smudge under your eye." "Okay," Mona chirped, skipping happily toward the bathroom. As soon as the bathroom door clicked shut, and he heard the water running, the warm, loving smile on Do-jin's face instantly vanished. His features turned to stone. His eyes grew cold and sharp, like a predator locking onto its prey. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, dialing a number he knew by heart. The line rang twice before it was picked up. Do-jin. The calm, serious voice of Dr. Han Ji-hoon answered. "Are you flying back today?" "Yes," Do-jin replied, his voice completely stripped of the affection he had just been using. He walked over to the glass window, looking out at the crashing ocean waves far below. "How did it go?" Ji-hoon asked carefully. "Listen to me, Do-jin. I still think this marriage is a terrible idea. If you hate her so much, just sign the divorce papers. I don't know why you put yourself through this. You know what that woman is capable of. She nearly ruined your life 2 years ago." A dark, chilling smirk pulled at the corner of Do-jin's mouth. "Divorce is too easy, Ji-hoon. She needs to pay." There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "Revenge is a poison, Do-jin. If you play toxic games with a dangerous woman, you are going to burn. She is toxic. The devil is playing a new game now, Ji-hoon," Do-jin scoffed, his voice dropping into a deadly, quiet whisper. "She's acting like a frightened, innocent little rabbit. She pretends to be the perfect, sweet wife. It's a brilliant act." "Seriously? Is she that shameless?" Ji-hoon asked. "Yes. She's that shameless, and I hate her more with the cheap act she's using to convince me that she's now a changed person," Do-jin hissed, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the phone. "I have so many ways to finish her off, but I will take it slowly and painfully. I remember what she made me endure when I was completely helpless and couldn't defend myself." Do-jin looked toward the closed bathroom door. He could hear Mona softly humming a happy tune as she washed her face. "She thinks she has me fooled," Do-jin concluded, his voice dripping with pure malice. "But I am going to rip that sweet mask right off her face. Her torture is just beginning." He ended the call, slipping the phone back into his pocket just as the bathroom door opened. Mona stepped out, looking radiant and completely innocent. "I'm ready, darling," she smiled. Do-jin's cold eyes instantly softened into a warm, adoring gaze. He walked over to her, wrapping his arm protectively around her shoulders. "Let's go home, wifey," he smiled, and Mona, completely blind to the terrifying trap she was walking into, leaned her head against his shoulder and followed her worst nightmare right out the door. Oh my God, the suspense is actually killing me. Do-jin doesn't believe Mona lost her memory at all. He thinks she is just acting innocent, and he is planning to punish her for a dark secret from their past. What did Mona do to him when he was helpless? Guys, if you are completely hooked on this mystery, you have to subscribe right now. We are just getting started, and the drama waiting for Mona in Seoul is going to blow your mind. Turn on your notifications, hit the like button, and I will see you in part 2.
Subscribe to Afro-Korean Diaries for more stories